say. Because just also to add, we're recording because we know that many of the practitioners who are here actually look at this afterwards, because at this time of the day they're actually at work, working as educators or as principals of schools. So we are aware of that. Over to you, Elena.
Thank you very much, Florian. I'm not driving, so I'm sitting in my room. I have the honor actually to welcome everyone to our today's discussion. And my name is Olena Bech. I'm coordinating innovative teaching and learning at the ETF. And we are focusing on the ways new learning is taking place these days, which means supporting not only those main actors who are part of this new learning of the 21st century, including the educators, all those who support meaningfully learners, young or adults. And we are also focusing on the ways how to support learners, including the teaching methodologies, the learning approaches, the tools for learning and teaching. And also, of course, we are trying to bring together the important support organizations and providers themselves who are providing learning in various forms. And of course, the most difficult task these days is to ensure that lifelong learning throughout lives, is seen in its all complexity, and that we would be able to capture all those ways to ensure that people throughout their lives, first of all, have the agency to be active learners, to be able to set up their learning goals, and also to see their advantages, to see the gaps in their knowledge and skills and competences as a whole, but also that those who provide learning would be able to support learners in the ways that are adequate to the current period of time. And our attention to adult learning was gradually growing from the fact that we have been communicating with providers of vocational education and training, general secondary education, adult learning, non-formal learning in companies. And we understood that there are certain aspects that are important to see, to zoom into, and to understand, for example, how can we support providers of formal education, including vocational education and training, in providing learning for adults as non-formal learning, but still as learning that is taking place in a meaningful way, in a planned way, in a structured way, that could be bringing important results for the careers and for personal life success. And so this year we have tried to go through different ways. We launched this club, as you know, to look into the specific aspects that are important for the members of our community, for yourselves. And every club is very different. So it's up to you as members of the club to decide what objectives you will set, for example, for next year, because we will be only next year starting to work full scale. So it requires some consideration, and we will dedicate time to this in the future to really see the needs and to decide together how we can bring the result together that will be important for all of us. And also we conducted this year an event which was dedicated to supporting vet providers in the provision of learning to adults. This took place in November, and it was in partnership with the three big EU vet provider associations, EDBB, EFTA, and FVET, and also in close cooperation with the European Association for Adult Learning and with some other very important partners. So we are bringing today some of the takeaways from this event into this meeting, the club, to make sure that we see the connection, that we don't miss any important points which were raised either in our online discussions or in the face-to-face event that took place. It was relatively small, but it's important to keep an overview. And we see that there are two layers or two levels of engagement, of coordination of peer learning among ourselves that we should keep in mind. One is the system level, where we are looking at what should be done by policymakers, by different players at system level, in order to support learning of adults in all its complexity. Kind of ecosystem approach that would include all different players with their visibility requirements, with their resources, with their capacities. And then there is the provider level. And at the provider level, there is a lot of different, very focused aspects and broad areas. For example, we know that we need to support learners, that it's very important to ensure that they have the mechanisms that provide resources for their learning, that ensure that they have time for learning, given that they are busy people, they are working mostly, and they have family life, etc. And so we need to ensure that we can capture the outcomes of learning so that people can be certified based on their learning outcomes, based on the demonstrated competences. So we are bringing into this discussion the aspect of micro-credentials, validation of non-formal learning, and the structure of learning programs that might be flexible, that need to be modularized, that needs to be personalized and differentiated. And also, we are looking at various areas of provision of adult learning, in company training, training that is taking place in the initial vet provider setting. And of course, another aspect that I would like to mention is making sure that all these aspects are connected with the career guidance, with the ways to ensure outreach, finding those who need learning, helping them to come to the places where learning could be taking place and supported. So I just mentioned a couple of those important aspects, and we have a very interesting group of distinguished speakers today who would be sharing their expertise and their insights. And this meeting is a little bit special because we are conducting it together with our important partner, and it was designed together. So I will just give the floor back to Florian to explain what is special about today's event. And thank you very much for being here.
Thank you very much, Olena, and welcome again to all. Some joined now while Olena was speaking. So this version of the Adult Learning Club has a special focus because our friends and partners from the European Association for the Education of Adults brought in members of their network to share their experience with us. And we have a special focus on reaching out to disadvantaged groups of adults. And so I'm very happy to hand over to Tina Mavric from EAEA to facilitate the first session. Tina, over to you.
Thank you so much, Florian, and for the invitation for having us here. Today, I'm going to be joined with three ladies that are going to speak about their very good practices. I will be joined by Joan McSweeney from Cork College for Further Education and Training from Ireland, by Gerhild Gangelbauer from Vienna Education Center, and she's also here in the name of the Association of Austrian Adult Education Centers, and also by Zara Sousa from Portuguese Association for Adult Education and Training. Thank you so much for taking the time to come here and speak to us. As we are just running a bit late, I will start with the first question that is going to be addressed to Zara first, because I know that she has to leave a bit earlier. So please, if possible, could you in a few minutes present what strategies have you found most effective in engaging learners from disadvantaged backgrounds? And exactly how do you tailor your approach to address their specific needs and challenges? Thank you so much, Zara, for going on first.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you today to share some insights about how to better reach disadvantaged adults. In behalf of the MOVA project and in behalf of APEFA, thank you for the invitation. The MOVA project, I will present it briefly because it's a project that we are very proud to participate and to develop during these last 2 years. The Move Up project is a project that intends to create a flexible and quality upskilling pathway for unemployed mothers with low qualifications, emphasizing the competences that are acquired throughout motherhood. It focuses on basic skills, but also in the PSL, personal, social, and learning competences. So here the motto is that motherhood is an asset. So we have to develop a long way to reach these mothers. And in this project, we considered that developing a firm outreach strategy was the safe place and the better place to start. So we considered several points that are transversal to other, that can be, of course, transversal to other projects and other experiences regarding adult education in our country, in Portugal. So I'm going to highlight some of that activities or strategy that we developed and be comfortable to ask any questions that you want. So when we develop some activity or some project, we are sure that we need to start to make a clear message. What is the issue that we are addressing? In this case, of course, that with the Move Up project was a bet that was almost won, because when we address mothers and we make them aware that motherhood is an asset, that motherhood, they can learn and develop competences in this informal context. And there are competences that they acquired, like multitasking, managing conflicts. And I could stay here all morning talking about these competences. And we make aware to these mothers that these competences can be recognized, validated, and certificated. So they have a place in the educational system, for example, in the Qualifica centers, and they can easily understand this message. So if we can make this message clear and engage them and make them aware that they are an asset, they are being empowered and more motivated to integrate the educational system. So we have the communication. We consider that is a main issue to engage them in the project, but also to engage stakeholders. So considering the word that someone spoke a little while ago, we have two layers to engage our target group, but also to engage stakeholders that we are going to call to help to join us in targeting our target group, that in the Move Up project was mothers with low qualifications, unemployed mothers with low qualifications. So communication here is very important to transmit this message and how we want to reach. It has to be short messages, clear, and even we have to consider the design. In this communication strategy, we engage our target group. We called mothers to see the materials, we shared the project with them, we shared the materials, and the materials that we used online, on social media, on posters that we shared in several organizations that we took as partners also here in Portugal. It was our target group that shared their opinion regarding the best ways to communicate. Also, we mapped good practices. In Portugal, APEFA, and in this case, the Move Up project, we considered that working as a network involving stakeholders and other organizations that work with our target groups that we want to develop this project with, or the project, our activities that we develop, is important because they know particular characteristics of these target groups. So we have to map good practices of similar activities that target these mothers that are low qualified and unemployed in order to better reach them. Because this target group, in some way, for some other activity, is already targeted to do other projects. For example, how to better get a job in the employment services. So it's important to see and to work with stakeholders, involve stakeholders, because as we usually say, we are all working in the same way. We have to look in the same direction. So the several stakeholders and several organizations are working together in order to reach these disadvantaged groups.
Definitely, definitely. I will have to here say that I have shared the project website of the Move Up,
Thank you.
and if the participants would have any questions, they are welcome to put them in the chat. But as we are very tight with the time today, I would then go with the same question to the other speakers. Perhaps we can then start with Joan. You have the same question. What strategies have you found most effective? What is your activity and how you are dealing with disadvantaged groups? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tina, and thank you to everybody. It's wonderful to be here this morning and have the opportunity to share practice with you. So my name is Joan McSweeney, and I'm a further education and training adult guidance counsellor working in with our learners in literacy services across North Cork. So our practice really evolved. Like in my work, I suppose often the challenge for learners and clients is how to source an employer to take them on as an apprentice. But actually, this practice evolved from a different challenge, which was a young man who had actually found an employer to take him on as an apprentice. But then when it came to register him, it became evident that he did not have the educational requirements, which in Ireland is 5 junior certificate passes, which is the exam that young adults would do after 3 years in school here in secondary school. So we said, oh, okay, well, this is amazing. This young man has actually got an employer. So we've got to figure out how can we help him to get an equivalent qualification. So I worked with colleagues, and this is it. I mean, there's just a fantastic team of very person-centered colleagues here in North Cork. So we put our heads together and we said, okay, so let's look at this. So from Solus, the national body who organises apprenticeships, they clarified that an equivalent qualification is what we call QQI, Quality and Qualifications Ireland, Level 3 award. So that's mapped on our national framework of qualifications as being equivalent. And then they specified certain components that they wanted, including mathematics, communications, and personal effectiveness. So I suppose some of the challenges were, like, for example, the first young fella, he had left school four years ago. He was very nervous about returning to education. But I suppose when I sat with him and explained the QQI pathway and explained that there was no big exam at the end of it, it was very much based on ongoing learning in the class and putting evidence in a folder. He bought into it, in fairness. And his other challenge, I suppose, was he could not give up full-time work. He could not afford to give up full-time work. And the employer wanted to keep him working while he was working towards this qualification. So the buy-in from the employer was really important in freeing him up to come and attend some classes with us during the day in our centre. The other exciting thing, I suppose, we discovered on this project is like a recognition of prior learning. So we discovered he could use his junior certificate subjects to get exemptions from the equivalent level 3 components. So that was really exciting because it meant that from coming from a place where he felt, his education level wasn't good enough, that actually his junior certificate subjects were going to be recognised and actually were going to make it possible to achieve a full award in a faster time frame. But one of the challenges there was that there's a 5-year limit, and all of this is explained in more detail in the presentation, and the links are in there, which I'll go through later. But so we only had a 6-month time frame with him, the first fella, to get him through. So again, kudos and credit to him for coming on board and following through, to all our staff and our tutors that helped him. But our concern was that within the 6-month time frame, we would not be able to offer him one of the components which he required, which was a level 3 personal effectiveness component. So that is when I remembered that we also have this NALA, online learning, again, a national organisation, who allowed people to work online with help with tutors if needed to complete QQI components at levels 1, 2 and 3. So we were able to register him as a Cork ETB learner on this system, make sure he was comfortable with it and check in with him. And he was able to achieve the additional components required in a 6-month time frame, and he is now registered as an apprentice. So not only has he reclaimed his identity, a positive sense of being able to achieve an education, but he's now actually in employment as well. And I suppose in my presentation, I'll go through a second person. Again, a different pathway in collaboration with another education training board. So that's really the project, I suppose. And traditionally, these young men would not have come into our literacy services. You know, they would be very underrepresented. But I think the motivating factor here was this would mean a pathway to a job. But I also think the person-centered approach and the fact that we were willing to adapt our practices and really think outside the box and work together, and also the buy-in from employers, like all of that made it possible to get this young lad over the line. And he's just beyond delighted now to be working full-time, and to continue with his education through the apprenticeship pathway. So
Thank you.
I hope that's answered the questions.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Joan. I feel like we are listening to the same thing as Zara mentioned, how important community is. And when
Yes.
community sticks together, you are really able to achieve a lot, and you are able to get to these vulnerable groups that usually are not that engaged
Yes.
into learning, into education, and so on. So I'm very curious if also Gerhild had maybe a similar solution to the initiative that she is working on. Please, Gerhild, go ahead.
Okay. Thank you for being here. And I suppose that the idea I'm presenting is in a way different than the speakers before presented. Our initiative is quite general because our topic is about raising awareness of basic education needs. And as we know, since yesterday was the day where the new figures were published, how many people all over Europe and all over the world have quite low-level literacy skills, and Austria is also affected. And our project about raising awareness, I think the very specific thing is that we work together with people who are not so good in reading or writing or mathematics or digital competences. We work with them together because we didn't want to speak about the people, but so we share with them our expertise, and they talk about what they about the problems they had to figure in their life. And this is I think this is one point in our project which works very good, and together we are developing our materials, we are reflecting our workshops. So we go in public, we go in offices where people work, in public services, social services, health services, and so on, and try to inform and sensitize counselors. So this is, we don't go the direct way. We go a bit complicated through institutions, but we hope that their information can be spread and sensitize counselors how they can deal in a quite respectful way with customers when they get aware that maybe there's a problem with reading and writing. And also we give information about all the courses which exist for free in Austria, so that people can attend them. What was, when I have it correctly in my mind, one of the biggest challenges is to get a step in these institutions. So if it's a lot of work it's a lot of work that they open the doors. So it's easy when you know somebody in the employment center or whatever it might be, or in the hospital. Otherwise, it's a never-ending engagement in writing emails, in getting contact, and so on and so on. And it always and what we learned is that it's not a ball that automatically will run. We always have to give a impulse, and therefore we also changed our formats in the last period of funding, which is also another challenge, because we have the funding for our project just for 1 year, and usually from March to May we know if the funding is accepted. But we have to make our preparations before. So that is it. I think I want to make here a point.
Perfect. That's perfectly fine. Thank you so much for mentioning that. We do have a question from the audience. They are wondering if all of your organizations are state-funded organizations. So maybe, Gerhild, while I have you here, could you just quickly explain, is it a state-funded?
No, but the Wiener Volkshochschulen, they have some amount from the city, from Vienna, and then there is a lot of project foundation. And for example, for this project, we have foundation by the ministry.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. And then I would go then back to Zara, and I would ask the same thing. Your organization, is it a public entity, a private one, NGO?
APEFA is a non-profit organization. So we develop activities. Of course, we participate in several projects like the Move Up, of course, but it's a non-profit organization. So we develop our activity with stakeholders and with partners in volunteer work.
Thank you so much, Zara. And then the same for Joan.
Hi, yes, I do actually work. The education training boards are the publicly funded organisations in Ireland to deliver further education and training. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this little intermediary question. So we have the next round that is going to be in the next 9 minutes. We have a question of if you are able to share an example of a challenge you encountered in implementing your outreach initiative and how you overcame it. And I'm then again going to start with Zara. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to mention 4 parts, but the first one is definitely a challenge, because when in the Move Up project, when we address the target group that are unemployed mothers with low qualifications, the first challenge is that we are addressing gender stereotypes. So when we address these kind of issues, is always difficult because we're talking about changing mentality, cultural issues. If we can overcome this challenge, yes, we made part of the path that all society has to walk in the same direction, that is to overcome the gender stereotypes. So we did part of this strategy, but of course we know that's still a lot to do. It was a gender literacy activity, the Move Up project and other activities, but we strongly believe that we are going to overcome this challenge in the next 100 years or more, maybe. On the other hand, I think we contributed here in Portugal with Move Up project, with our target groups, to the motto that is lifelong learning. Because we have several events that happened in the last few years, for example, COVID-19, that we know that adult learners realize that maybe if they were more prepared, maybe if they invested more in their training, they could be more prepared to face the COVID-19 pandemic. So I think this was a very an event that happened that maybe raised awareness to this issue. But considering the Move Up project, after mothers be aware that motherhood is an asset and the competences acquired throughout motherhood are important and they matter and they have a place in the key competences referential considering the Qualifica centers. I think that they will never look at the maternity role, the parenting role, the same way again. Because we are all used to seeing mothers as the effectiveness part of the relationship, the nourish part, but we never see them as a context, an informal context of learning that can be transferred to the labor market. So this is the big challenge. Now they are aware that these competences have a place in the key competences referential and they can be recognized and valued. And I'm going only to share with you two other challenges that I think that are important, and one of them that we could overcome. That was tailor the move up plan to these women to the mothers' needs, because we can expect that mothers that are unemployed, and if they're unemployed, we expect them to take care of their children, but not only their children, they also take care of their mothers-in-laws or other dependent members of the family, have the same availability to be part of training plans or activities in the same schedules that other people. So we have to tailor the activities that we develop with our target groups, in this case mothers, but we can talk about others, to their needs. We need to make these activities flexible in order to reach their goals. Otherwise, they will be again out of the system, out of these activities. And to end, just to leave a challenge, maybe for this learning club or in the next activities, is the training of practitioners. Because especially when we consider, for example, gender stereotypes roles, sometimes there are some of us that perpetuate these same stereotypes. So we need to be well prepared to face the needs of disadvantaged groups in a world that is always changing and is obliging us to face new challenges daily. So we also need to be prepared to anticipate, because the challenges are huge and they are changing really fast. I don't know, Tina, if I answered all your questions, because I could be here talking all morning if you want.
Completely understand. And I would really like to mention here that Move Up was a 2-year project and it is going to be finishing now. So we really hope that we will be able to somehow get a continuation out of it and be able to build on the results that you were able to achieve as well.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And then I would then go on to Joan, the same question.
Thank you. Certainly, a challenge that I would like to share with you a little bit more this morning is the second person who came to us in a similar situation. Even though he was working in the area local to where our centre is based, he was living in a different county. So he wanted to access the training, the pathway in the Education Training Board in Tipperary, which is where he was living. And I was able to reach out to the literacy staff there and explain the pathway, and then they were able to meet with him and develop a different pathway that worked for him. But one of the challenges within that was this young man, I suppose, had only left school the previous year. And I think, he's an example of the impact of COVID on many of our young people in secondary school, and how the online learning during lockdowns, created a disengagement and a switching off and a lack of motivation around learning. And I suppose he would have experienced this in returning to us. But I suppose a very positive response to that then was developed by the Tipperary staff member in identifying the right tutor to work with him. So she picked a tutor who had a lot of experience of working with other young learners. And I suppose what he was able to bring was all of that experience, and encouragement. And also, I suppose, bringing in additional skills. So, for example, this young man was finding it difficult to manage his time, which you can totally understand. You know, he's in his first job, working hard all day, and then in the evening has to turn around and try and work on his education. So, and he mentioned it in his evaluation at the end about how he learned other skills like time management skills, for example, as well as completing his level 3 pathway. Um, and I suppose another challenge for us is really just how to get that word out there, because there is certainly early school leaving is a challenge, and I think it is probably for many countries post-COVID. Those numbers have gone up. So I suppose it really is how can we get this message out there that there is flexible pathways where you can finish up your education, and indeed, it can be a pathway onto employment and other positive outcomes for yourself. So something, I suppose, because I'm a guidance counsellor, I suppose I was really looking at how can I get the message out to my colleagues in Ireland. So we have an Adult Guidance Association. So I wrote up a case study, which was shared in our newsletter. Also, I suppose it's like, how can we get these young men earlier, you know, in the cycle? So looking at school guidance counsellors and looking how can we get the message to them through their professional body, the Institute of Guidance Counsellors. So I'm going to contribute to an article on their newsletter for early next year as well as communicating with our local cohorts of school guidance counsellors as well. And I suppose I also think there's a challenge to get this visible at national level, for example, with our apprenticeships office. So this is something we're working on at the moment. So there's a website, apprenticeships.ie, which lists all of the apprenticeships available. And there is a question in the frequently asked questions section, you know, what if I don't have the education requirements, you know, to be eligible to do an apprentice? And at the moment, that just lists recognition of prior learning, and it also lists pre-apprenticeship courses, which typically are full-time and which these young men would never have engaged with. So yeah, Tina, I hope that's answered your question there.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
It does. And I have also put the apprenticeships link to the chat. So then we have the last but not least, Gerhild, please could you let us know what are you facing challenges with?
So I think I'll again focus on our formal structure and the challenges we had to face there. And as I told you before, that it was quite hard to gain access to diverse institutions and people who are daily dealing with other people with less literacy competences. So we decided after 1 year or a half a year making those workshops. Those workshops are lasting for 3 or 4 hours, and we are quite flexible with this form. So we can make them indoor, or we can invite people to the Wiener Volkshochschulen. But we realized that interest for the workshops was there, where there also has already been some awareness. So the question was, how can we change our format to reach other people, other institutions? And we decided to go more into the public or into the semi-public, not only to make workshops for people working in offices, but to use a metaphor, also going in the front rooms. So we had the idea. One idea was that we offer desking rooms, so where people get directly help when they have to fill a form or something else, and it's also a possibility to spread information for the courses. So this was the one idea, our writing desks or writing rooms. And the other idea was a kind of information stand, which is not always a stand, because we are sometimes quite flexible, and we are in public places. We are at around big tram stations, or in markets, or in shopping centers, or also at labor market services in the front. And we also, what we do there is just the same thing. We give information, we sensitize, we try to give people the feeling, if there is contact, and there is a lot of contact, that let's say our focus is on, it's not an individual problem when somebody has problems with reading and writing, because also the other speakers, there are so much problems have to do with school system or school living, and so on and so on. Yeah, so this is the challenge in a formal way, where we slightly made a change, I think. Well, and I think it was good. It was a good experience for us.
Thank you so much. Right now, we're going to finish the panel discussion, and we are still going to get to know more about Jones and Garhild's initiatives a bit later on. So I would give the word now to Florian, and then we have another discussion as well. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Tina, Zara, John, and Gerhild. Really very rich discussion and sharing of experience. Just for our participants, if you have any questions, feel free to put them into the chat, or raise your hand. We're not so many today, so it's feasible. In any case, we will have a more open discussion round a bit later on, but feel free to ask questions, yeah, or share also your own reflections or thoughts. I mean, the main idea of this webinar today is really to open a new topic, because vet providers will have to open up to new learners, to low-skilled, to workers. And for that, it's not simply enough to just have a standard training. And I think that's the main message we want to send. It will not help anybody if you just offer a standard training and wait until they come. They will not come. There is much more you need to do, and we heard very good examples of how to reach out to low-skilled people, to unemployed mothers, for example. I think those are all very valuable examples that give us an idea that more needs to be done than just offering a standard learning program. So thanks so much for that first round. If you allow me, I will take the floor for a couple of minutes, and my colleague Olena in the opening words already mentioned that we had co-organized an event on adult learning and education in VET, and I just wanted to share with you a couple of key takeaways. So yeah, please move to the next slide for the colleagues to see. A first session that we had in this event was about enhancing the initial vet provider's role in offering also continuous vocational education and training. And some key takeaways from that discussion are that increasing accessibility to learning is really important through flexibilization of offers. It was mentioned also by our colleagues now in the panel. And next to the more classical topics of recognition and validation as means to ease the access to learning, or micro-credentials, yeah, modularization, also the topic of networking was stressed in the discussion. So creating networks to develop learning participation, to increase learning participation. Increasing investment in lifelong learning by companies was mentioned as well. Just reminding of the example of Norway, where adult educators were sent to companies in a state-funded project to train workers, low-skilled workers, on basic skills, for example, in reading and writing. Then also it was stressed that we need more personalized learning pathways, in line also what was mentioned now by the panelists. So adapting the offers to the needs of the adults, which then really allows to go away from this standard approach of standardized all-fit um, uh, learning offers. So overall, of course, more funding is required to have such an approach, because the standard learning offer and the personalized learning offer requires different resource investment. Another point that was made is that more or less in the EU candidate countries, you have the legal framework for adult learning and education, but the participation rates are extremely low. And it was stressed that there is an importance of integrating learning as a topic also into social dialogue, to bring the topic of lifelong learning, continuous education into the companies, into the world of adults and workers. And there was also mentioned the need to support adults in learning. So it is a wider support required financially, in order to be able to pay for costs of learning, but also in terms of time, allowing different time flexibility, learning content and learning place flexibility to adapt to the needs of the different learning groups. But it's also related to ensuring income for families of low-skilled people while they're participating in learning. And a good example was made by Georgia, who have invented special scholarships to allow adults to still have an income while learning. Also, relocation support for learning was mentioned there from Georgian side. And last but not least, for that first session, outreach and career guidance to support those in need of learning was mentioned to be very crucial, because we know also that those higher educated are those who continue in engaging in learning, and those lower educated will not. So that's a crucial element. Next slide, please. A second topic that we focused on in the discussion was about empowering teachers and trainers. And there, obviously, the topic of pre and in-service training was stressed on andragogy. So how do we work with adults, which is different from learning with young people. If you could mute yourself, thank you. And that links, of course, to a more policy level question of, are there standards, for continuous education and training offers? Are providers accredited? Is there a lifelong learning requirement, the continuous education and training requirement for educators? So that links also to the policy level. Then educators require support in many ways. Either they are, as we call it, a lonely profession. So it's good to link them to a community of practitioners to support peer learning, or we can support them through creating partnerships with companies or partnerships with other actors that help them in their work. It's about setting up good working environments, including infrastructure, digital tools, other tools and methods. But also, that was stressed as well, to ensure the well-being of the educators, to offer supervision, peer feedback. Next slide, please. Then we asked ourselves, how can education and training providers be supported to be ready for the future? And there I come back to what Olena said in the beginning. We have the system level, and there is absolutely too much fragmentation when we look at adult learning and education. There are the formal providers, the non-formal providers. We have a lot of informal learning taking place, especially at the workplace, but also outside. We heard about motherhood. So it's about creating an ecosystem approach where all relevant stakeholders need to work together, and ministries of education was stressed do have an important role in creating integrated approaches. This boils also down to some very practical questions, like creating one national web page, for example, where you can find user-friendly information about learning, about career guidance, and so on. But it also concerns, of course, funding, pooling resources, ensuring stable funding to move away from project-based activities, integrating non-formal learning offers and others with the NQF, with the National Qualifications Framework. So there are a lot of issues at system level. And one point that was raised, and I think is important, that we need to start from the individual learner when setting up policy frameworks and ensure that providers have the resources they need to meet the individual needs of the different groups. So that is a very different approach, but that's how it will need to work to make it work. And of course, setting up such a framework requires the continuous training of educators and trainers. Ensuring school autonomy would be a very good way to allow for catering for different target group needs. So that would allow to adapt approaches, allow to establish specific partnerships, raise funds, make income maybe, in order to take other actions, decide who your teachers and educators are, and not just get them allocated. So also adult learning and education is, as I mentioned, many times non-formal. So the whole topic of recognition of prior learning and validation of non-formal and informal learning becomes very relevant. At the provider level, the future of adult learning education was discussed needs to be beyond technical skills learning. It's not only about professional learning, it's about the diversity of learning goals. It might be personal, it might be social, citizenship was mentioned, or professional, or all. So the future of adult learning must be wider. Technical skills learning, life skills learning, citizenship learning. In any way, it must meet the various needs, and it must be needs-based and relevant to the individuals. So also more work-based learning was mentioned as one way to also flexibilize and personalize the learning and make it more relevant to people and also labor markets. And it was concluded that there is a need to increase participation of disadvantaged groups, new groups of learners like low-skilled workers, people with disabilities. This is really a matching webinar related to that topic. And to support all of what I mentioned, quality assurance for adult learning and education was discussed as very important aspect, which is, by the way, not easy given the diversity of learning offers. Next slide, please. And finally, let me share some results of a survey that we had conducted with participants of that event before they participated to show areas in which the candidate countries asked us to support them in. And as you can see, we asked them about the challenges they face in providing education and training to adults. And we asked them to comment on how they believe those challenges could be addressed and what support would they need to address them efficiently. And I would just look at the last question. So if we could move to the last slide, please. To give you an overview, it's a bit small, I hope you can read it. Basically, the key areas where they asked us for support are better integration of adult education into national wider strategies, including employment strategies, the whole area of recognition and validation, supporting the flexibilization of learning offers, providing incentives to individuals and employers to invest in skills development. Outreach and communication strategy were two topics. The whole area of funding obviously is an issue. Then bringing in different partners in the work of adult learning, setting up partnerships, yeah. Then enhancing teacher, educator training, professionalization. And also that includes international exchange opportunities. So I stop here with that presentation. I hope I didn't bombard you too much. What I want to do now is get back to you and check with you in a small poll that you will see in the chat now. What are your priority topics? Where would you like us to work more together on? Is it teachers and trainer empowerment? Is it increasing participation? So please, you will see in the chat now the poll. If you could open and let us know what your key priorities are. You can select multiple choices, so up to 3. Make your priority listing. And if something is not on there, just raise your hand and let us know. So the front runners seem to be empowering teachers and trainers, absolutely at the core, of course. Meeting needs of learners. Yeah. Cooperation, collaboration. This will help us also in design the next sessions of that club meetings. Yeah, scroll down a bit, maybe to see just if there are any other front runners down there. Yeah, so cooperation, coordination, flexibilization, meeting needs of learners. Yeah. And the top one was empowering teachers, trainers. Yeah. Thanks a lot. You can keep on making your votes. I give back the floor to Tina and to our colleagues Joan and Gerhild.
Thank you so much. So the last part of today's session from our side is going to be to delve a bit deeper into the practices that were already presented. So I'd first like to invite Joan, sorry, it's going to be Joan first, for the in-depth presentation. Again, in-depth for 10 minutes, so not that much, but let's try,
Yeah.
on the topic of the inclusion of men from disadvantaged backgrounds. Please go ahead.
Thanks very much, Tina. And if somebody could share my presentation as well, please. Great. Thanks so much. Thank you. And again, thank you for the opportunity this morning. It's been such a rich learning and sharing already. And it's great to have just a little bit more time now to speak on our pathway. So I suppose firstly, I just wanted to mention the title. So this is a quote actually from the first young man that I sat with in a guidance session. And when I was explaining about the QQI level 3 alternative pathway, his comment was, "Oh my God, Joan, I don't think people know about this. I never heard of QQI when I was in school." And he said this statement of, "There are many more young lads like me out there." So I suppose I have this statement in my head all the time. And I suppose that's why I'm really grateful for any opportunity to share of this and say, right, how can we help those many more young lads like these guys who have come to us to find their way back into education and to creating further good outcomes around employment and further education for them. And thank you. So I had mentioned already, I work with Cork Education Training Board. So there's just some stats there from a recent report on our organisation. And then just give you some context. So I work in North County Cork, for anybody who's familiar with Ireland. So my main base is Mallow, but the pathway I'm sharing with you this morning comes from our centre, our further education training centre in Fermoy. So I would travel to that centre and other centres to do adult guidance counselling support with classes and with individuals in those centres. Thank you. Next slide, please. So I suppose I've spoken to this a lot already, but I suppose I just think it really is an opportunity again to talk to the strengths of the approach, and really to give credit to those first young men, who came on the steep learning curve with us and were willing to learn as we were and kept turning up and kept following through. So, an inspiration to us and a lot of learning for us. And again, also, I suppose the employer is key here because where possible, to understand that the person is working towards this qualification, needs some time to do that, and also needs, where possible, to be released during the day to attend some of our QQI level 3 classes. And lastly, from this slide, really to highlight, I don't think this would have happened without this collaborative and innovative approach. So, that saying or metaphor, it takes a village. So I think it needed a couple of us to put our heads together, me bringing the guidance counselling perspective, the apprenticeships referring in the first place, like that young man would never have come to us if she hadn't referred him in. And then I suppose really my colleague, the resource worker in that centre, who is also very person-centred and was willing to say, okay, well, how can we adapt our provision to actually respond in a person-centred way? Next slide, please. So look, I've included a lot of links here because there's a lot of information, but I suppose if we start at the bottom, so SOLAS, as I mentioned, are the national body that oversee the apprenticeships and the standards required to enter and to achieve them. So I suppose it was through conversations with them that we were able to clarify that for these young men who didn't have enough of their junior certificate, i.e. 5 subject passes, that this alternative pathway of a level 3 major award would be acceptable instead, and would give them access to becoming an apprentice. And I don't know how familiar people are with our qualification system, but I suppose there is level 3 awards in lots of areas. The most common one is what's called general learning. And to achieve that, a learner would usually do 6 subjects, and each of those subjects would have 10 credits each. So looking to achieve a 60 credit to achieve a full award. And you can see here that SOLAS were specifying they wanted people to have communications, personal effectiveness component, and also a maths component, which you can understand all of these would be very important for in their job as an apprentice going through in work afterwards. So the other piece I put up there then is just a little a slice, if you like, of our national framework of qualifications, which is showing you, yes, that this junior certificate is the state exam or the junior cycle after 3 years in a secondary school with us, and it shows how it's mapped onto a level 3 on our national framework. And the final document, which was a really important one for us, is this exemptions document, which is created by QQI, which is the Quality and Qualifications Ireland. So again, this is our national body in Ireland, which oversees, the standardization, the quality assurance of many, many qualifications in our country. And I suppose this is the document which we refer to, which showed us, depending on the junior cert subject our learners had, could they get an equivalent for a level 3 component? So this recognition of prior learning idea, and also helping then for them to achieve their award in a faster time frame. And I suppose I've underlined in red there a 5-year time limit, and actually that became critical for our first young person, as I will explain. And again, the links are there, and again, happy to clarify any of that afterwards. Okay, next slide, please. I also wanted to mention, because the time limit with the first person having only 6 months to complete their award and to be able to use the exemptions for his mathematics. We didn't have, as I mentioned, one of the required components, the personal effectiveness at level 3, available in our centre. So in order to support this young man to achieve the award and to be able to avail of the exemptions, I suggested that we look at NALA online learning, because again, as guidance counsellor, I had seen my clients, learners, using this during the COVID lockdown and really finding it brilliant to be able to continue with their learning in an online space. And this young man was quite confident with his digital skills. And once he became more familiar with the level 3 learning through classes in our centre, we then introduced him to NALA online learning with ongoing support with my resource worker colleague. So she was able to see how he was progressing online, and they could meet and work on something if he was getting stuck on something. And actually he got so comfortable with it in the end that he actually did an extra component that he didn't even need to do, which was a career planning level 3 component. And I suppose I just want to mention here as well that there's been nice ripple effects in that. I suppose we are seeing, tutors are now becoming more confident in using this NALA online learning with other groups, and in particular some of our young neurodiverse learners, again, who didn't maybe find the school environment was a great fit for them. They are also enjoying being able to learn and achieve certification through this NALA online learning platform. Thank you. Next slide, please. So look, there's a lot of information here, but I suppose it was just really trying to capture pathways of the first two learners, because, again, drawing on what Florian mentioned there, just to show it is person-centered, it is, tailored to every individual, and the flexibility that's there. So our first young man came to us with his Junior Cert Maths and Junior Cert Irish, so 2 subjects. And then we helped him to achieve his award in that very tight 6-month time frame by helping him to get exemptions for his Irish and Maths. And you can actually see that, again, when you look through the slides afterwards, the first 2 subjects, so Irish and Mathematics, on his certificate show exemptions. And then, as I mentioned, he completed further components in our centre, in group classes. And then he was also able to complete the final components through NALA online learning. And as you can see in the certificate, it doesn't show, it doesn't matter where they were completed. They all just add up together, and he was able to achieve his certification by gaining a full employability skills award. And he's now registered and working as a mechanical automation and maintenance fitting apprentice. That's a bit of a mouthful, but yeah, so he's delighted with that. So second young fella, he was the man I mentioned, maybe who, had left school more recently. Motivation was a bit of a challenge. So linking him and sharing our practice with a different education and training board. And he was able to get exemptions for 3 of his junior cert subjects. So he already had 30 credits halfway towards his full award when he came to us. So he was delighted to hear this. And then he was supported through one-to-one support in person with a tutor, and also then through online learning through Teams as well. And he achieved his General Learning Award, and he's now registered as a metal fabricator apprentice. Thank you. Next slide, please. So look, the impacts are there, and I suppose the key impact really is the positive re-engagement with education, achieving success in education, and also being able to, somebody, it's a good feeling knowing I have a good lifetime job. Like, that is such a key outcome for a young person who would have left school early and didn't think that was going to be possible for him. I've touched on some of the other ripple effects. I suppose what's lovely is we have an additional 4 young men now going through the same pathway at the same time. So they are actually in some classes together, and they are referring other young men into us. So those ripple effects are great. And then just next slide, please. Yeah, so like I mentioned, it's really trying to get the word out there so that more young people can benefit from this. And I have a link put in there to the AINTAS Adult Learner Journal, and that's a much more detailed outline of the process, and also contains really nice feedback from both the learners themselves and also from the other stakeholders that were involved in it. And as I mentioned there at the bottom, really looking now to see at a national level, can we get this pathway on the National Apprenticeship website for more people who may not find us, but they may find the website. And the last slide, please. So just to finish really with maybe making that link back with policy, I suppose I see this pathway very much links with, we have an adult literacy for life. So this is a 10-year adult strategy looking at literacy, numeracy, and digital literacy. And it really is talking about that collaboration with the Adult Guidance and Information Service, where I work from, and also the Adult Literacy Services, and that this collaboration will play an important role in, ensuring there's responsive and flexible learning pathways that meet people's current and future needs and ambitions. Okay, thank you very much, and happy to take questions.
Thank you so much, Joan, for sharing the initiatives even more in depth. And as we are kind of struck with time, I would then go please ahead with Gerhild's presentation, and it is going to be on the outreach to disadvantaged groups with low threshold learning offers. And if there are any questions for either Joan or Gerhild, please put them in the chat. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you for giving me the flow, and I would, Roberto, thanks a lot for sharing the slides. I hope it is not too irritating that the slides are in German and not in English. It is because of some a bit complex words in them, and my, as you already could hear, not very feeling secure in English. So our project title is, as I mentioned before, sichtbar, visible. So, and we are aiming the visibility for basic education needs. And there's another word next to sichtbar. It's the word unterwegs. It means something like being on the road, and it refers to our formats we can offer for the public. Okay, there are around now, since yesterday, it's not just 1 million people in Austria. I think it will reach 2 million people in Austria, which are not able to read so fluently or in a way that they know or can tell someone what they have read. And in our project, we work together with we call them Botschafterinnen. In English, it is the word ambassadors, because they are experts for this topic, and we work together with them. Why is our focus on the needs of basic education? The reason for it is on the one hand, you can see it's quite normal because there are so many people who lack competences in reading, writing, numeracy, or digital competences. And on the other hand, it's scandalized. And there are a lot of quite bad pictures about people who lack these competences. So we are often confronted with the picture of, if somebody cannot read and write properly, that must be an idiot. And people wonder that our ambassadors are wonderful speakers. So there's also the picture, someone that cannot read and write has no speech, has no word in English is missing. Sorry, he can't articulate himself or herself. So this is the one prejudice. The other prejudice is that the group of people who has difficulties in these basic competences are the migrants. And also this is not true. Most of the people with these problems live in Austria, have German as their first language or as their predominant language, so it's a bit fluid because of the reality of migration. And it's so we try to make or to build awareness that this problem is not imported in a way, it's here in our country. So please, the next slide. So there's again the overview over the 3 types of activities we do. Those workshops or training, short trainings for institutions. We address the bigger they are, the better for us. And what's working quite wonderful in those workshops is the cooperation with our ambassadors and people sharing our training. They're so touched by those stories our ambassadors tell them. They are so touched by problems they had to face, and they are so touched by the narration, how they overcame these problems. Our ambassadors, they are all of them are in learning courses, and I think 3 of them just finished their or got a certificate for compulsory school. So in Austria, you have to go for 9 years to school and then you get a certificate. And if you don't have this certificate, it's quite hard to make any further education or vocational training. And it's a big amount. It's a big amount without having a certificate. You have to go to school, but it can be for 9 years, but it can be that people lack a certificate which guarantees a further step. Okay, so back to the slide. One point, the workshops or trainings. The other I also mentioned before is the Schreibstuben or writing desks or writing rooms. Stube is a quite old word for a small room. Where we they are also pop-up writing desks. From our idea, we wanted them to pop up in different places in Vienna, and here we cooperate also with district offices, with municipal buildings. There's a big structure in Vienna. So we are in festivals, we are in district offices, we are in labor work offices, and so on and so on. And the last one, these are the info stands where we are also in the public or semi-public places. Okay, so next slide, please. And I think here this is just one visualization of one of our giveaways we take with us when we are in the public because our first step to become or to gain some attention is that, for me, example, when I'm part of the team, I tell people, do you know that 27 out of 100 people in Austria have difficulties with reading and writing? And then I give them the postcard, and quite often there is a kind of a very nice contact and interest. Next slide, please. On the right side, you can see one of our ambassadors. And on the left side, they are quite typical things people in offices get to hear when people have problems with writing and reading. For example, I forgot my glasses, or for example, I just got eye drops and can't see the form, or something else. We also made a brochure, and there we have a long list of possibilities how people who can't read and write try to find a way out. Try to find an exit. It can, and there are different ways. Okay, next slide, please. I have to look for time. I see this is just a few pictures from being on the street. And the very, very last slide, please. No, it's not the last. This is a banner when we make a writing room or writing desk with "Can I help you?" and some situations where help could or would be needed. And we also try to address digital skills, because nowadays it's one of the most it's one of the hardest barriers. So that's so many things when you go to an office. You don't have the choice. You have to do it digital. So okay, and yet now the last one, because at the end we make advertise. We advertise the learning courses all over Austria, and there is one phone number so we can give it away together with some other things. So we are not just, or we are not. Our interest is not to make the WHS, the Wiener Volkshochschulen, are great. We want to address the topic. I think this is our message. Okay, and we don't want to blame people. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for presenting these practices. So today, thanks to our members, you were able to hear more about the disadvantaged groups of people with literacy issues, people that are from disadvantaged backgrounds, and mothers, and how to acquire skills. I hope you were able to learn a bit from the presentations, and all of it is also going to be shared with you later on after the meeting adjourns as well. Thank you so much from our side.
Thanks a lot, Tina, Gerhild, and Joan. Really extremely interesting listening to you. Thank you so much. I have a lot of questions myself, but I guess also colleagues in the online room might have questions or reflections. So please feel free to ask. Open your microphone or write in the chat if you have any questions or reflections or experiences yourself.
Can I share something with
Please,
you?
Maria, please.
I work in a morning vocational school. I'm a dental technician, and we have adult students, not only from underprivileged backgrounds, but they have to redefine their career, and they have come back to get a certificate because vocational schools in Greece give a certificate. So it's not only the underprivileged groups, but other adults that have lost their jobs, they're unemployed, and there is that guidance that they can go back to school and get another certificate. And because I'm currently attending a postgraduate in vocational guidance, there as a technique, we learn that that could be a way. Guide, help assist adults to go back to get another certificate and open other horizons for them.
Mm-hmm. Thanks a lot for sharing, Maria. Are you working? Can I just ask back? Are you working alone in that school, or are you connected to some other service providers? Maybe you could share a bit more.
No, I work alone, but I just am an active, let's say, educator, and I try to be a facilitator.
Sure.
And if people ask me, I show them that way. Basically, I work with adolescents, okay? But among adolescents, we have also adults this year. And my school is an underprivileged region of Athens. And we have Roma, Roma people, Roman people. Yes. And we try also to get them come back to school and get a technical certificate if they can, but it's a little bit hard, that thing.
Sure.
Yes, but today I had a day off, so I was able to attend the seminar.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Maria.
But what you said is very hard. The connection and the network is very hard. I don't know what's happening in other countries, but here in Greece, you have to look for yourself, and you are like the only person to do that. Sometimes you think you feel disappointed.
Yeah.
You try to do something, and I don't know.
No, you make a point, and I think that's one of the takeaways from the discussion with our colleagues here, that this collaborative approach is the way to go, that you find partners that can help you achieve the objectives of your work. And if it's not happening nationally, it can also happen bottom up, but maybe Joan, Gerhild, Tina, you can share a bit how at school level you can work, at the local level, and how can you connect? What's your experience there?
Perhaps I can quickly start is that, yeah, the most important thing is to go out there, to have initiatives that are in place where you are able to go and meet relevant people, not just educators, but also everybody else. We are trying to see that we emphasize lifelong learning, and then if we cannot get to the adults themselves, we go bottom down, children. We try to see what they can contribute and how we can have workshops that are also important for the intergenerational learning. So there are definitely options, but yes, most of it relies on a person going out in the community and getting the first step, the first connection to community and seeing what is actually needed.
Thank you, Tina. Maybe Joe and Gerd, if you have brief 1-minute answer.
Okay, thanks, Maria. Yeah, I think you raise a very important point. It can be quite lonely, and absolutely, like I would feel that as the one guidance counselor, for example, in my whole region of 5 centres sometimes, and that's where I've learned really that collaborative approach with other like-minded colleagues, where you can just pick up the phone and go, oh, we have a problem here, or can we meet over a cup of coffee, and can we just put, what do you know about this? What do I know about this? And I suppose in terms of school, because I'm a guidance counselor, I suppose I would really see it's important to link back and to share this experience with our school guidance counsellors. So they were, I think, particularly around this whole QQI framework. I don't think many schools haven't had to think about it because they're so focused on the junior cycles and the leaving certificates. So I think we need to be bringing that information in earlier to people and creating the local referral pathways then. So hope that's helpful. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, really. I'm just looking at the time. Is there a last question from the participants? Any last comment? As I said, we will continue the Adult Learning Working Group meetings. We will take very much into account your feedback on the topics. So the topics that you've raised today and also in other meetings, to make sure they are relevant to you. Feel free to write us. Feel free to share your practices also on the joint open space area and also your challenges there. Yeah. So to have discussions about how to address those challenges. That's also me coming to the end of that meeting. We would like to build on the areas where you want to see more support, to really address them, help you in finding solutions to the challenges that you face, and make this a practical working group and plan for very concrete support activities for next year, 2025. And saying this, I just want to thank again our fantastic speakers, and in particular Tina and her team at the EAEA for connecting us to these brilliant practitioners and speakers. And thanks to Roberto, Marta in the background for the organization. And thanks to all of you for participating despite your very active agendas. And we will stay in touch and continue the exchange. Thank you very much to all of you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Have a
Thanks
nice
a
day.